Good evening, everybody. It's B flat. It is 5/23/2025, 4:52 p.m. local time. Uh, had some people make some comments regarding the previous video, which is section view of refraction and reflection as they come together to produce what we call Mirage. This is basically, again, dealing with visual image or visual information that originates from a point like a house, and how that information would make it, how it would invert as far as reflection. We know that reflection reverses an image. If this light went directly to the observer, there would be no reflection. However, if the light from this house travels down a path to the surface of the water, okay, the light coming off this is not going right to the observer. It's traveling again downward towards the surface of the water. Light coming off this house goes everywhere. That's why you could see it if you were, up in a tree, looking down from an airplane or from a cliff. You would see this house, as long as it's not obstructed by anything. But as far as reflections off the surface of the water, that light is also traveling down towards the surface of the water, and it will reflect at an angle of reflection heading back up. That reflection can make it back directly to the observer, or, as we'll see, it can, at some point where it meets an interface, a change, we're going to eventually call this point somewhere along the fold line or the plane of reflection. At that point, this visual information will redirect and then again head towards the observer. So in slide 2 here, and I've put numbers on the slides, we have two forms of reflection. And this would be specifically dealing with the reflection aspect and not refraction in any capacity. I'm going to be clear here. We are talking only about reflection. We would see from this distant object and the shoreline the mirror image of the house and the shoreline. It is inverted at this point. This is specular. Specular means more mirror-like. We would see the house. Now, in a diffuse reflection from the house, the light would come towards the house, or from the house towards the surface, but because of the waves, as we'll show in the next couple of slides, we will only interpret waves. We will not interpret a house. Okay, we will see waves. That is why at a local close body of water that anybody can walk to, some days they can walk up to the shore and see the reflection of everything that's on the distant shore. And some days when it's choppy, you can't see anything but the waves. This goes right back in line with, anybody can Google search this, diffuse reflection, specular reflection. This is not something I'm just making up. This has been known for a very long time. So if we move into slide 3, again, we can see from what I attempted to represent in the previous slides and just pointed to off the Google search, the rays coming from the house will hit at different points on the wave height and shape. This will cause the light coming from that house to reflect at all types of strange angles. This is one factor that would contribute to not seeing all of the house. What you'd have to consider at this point is that any wave between the house and the observer will have a height, and it will have a frequency. This will become important in future conversations, but it will contribute to what light will make it to the observer. Another factor is that when you have an undulating surface, you have competition for what is going to make it to the observer. This would be light from the sky, and there's a heck of a lot more light coming from the sky than there is from the house. These lights can find angles off of the surface to reflect backwards towards the observer. Okay, the reflected rays will need to clear the height of the frequency, the wave preceding it, which again will make sense later on down the line. Now, I've cleaned up this drawing a little bit to give it a number. All the drawings have been cleaned up to give the slides a number. Give it a little bit more space to separate what's going on so it's less confusing. I'm depicting 4 different scenarios with a mirage, and what it comes down to is the plane of the mirage, which will create the fold line of the mirage, as it's commonly referred to. That has a height. In example number 1, the height is smaller. Example number 2, higher. 3, even higher. 4, higher than that. We're going to move to slide number 6, but slide number 6 is basically a plane of mirage, or the plane of reflection, that creates the fold line that hits a height at the distant shore of midway up the window on the door. Now, let's just move into number 6. If I have to come back, I'll come back. So the mechanics of this. Again, light coming off of this house is going to travel on a path down towards a surface. At this point in time, this light has an orientation of upright, matching the house. Once we get to the surface where reflection takes place, this is the point of reflection on the surface or off of the surface. Okay, this is where reflection is happening. And reflection is going to now produce either the inverted house or the waves. This would be specular, a specular reflection. This would be a diffuse reflection of everything that's coming off the water's surface. Now, this fold line or plane of refraction is going to do 2 things. It's going to prevent us from seeing anything below the window. So the window on the door, I'm illustrating here that we are only going to be able to see from this point up regarding the fold line or the plane of refraction. Now, the information that's coming up off of the surface is also going to get trimmed up by the plane of refraction. And it is going to produce one of 2 scenarios. Okay, it's going to produce that based on what is coming off of the surface of the water. You can now see the upper portion of the house with the diffuse reflection off of the surface of the water that was reorientated through refraction. It is no longer just heading up above the observer. it is at this point redirected on the same path as what is coming from the house. Both of these paths are going to be observed by somebody at great distance. So you will see in both the upper portion of the house that you're looking at directly without reflection coming into play. And the lower portion you're looking at because reflection has come into play. Now, any observation that you look at now, you can either see the complete house when neither reflection or refraction is in play, which would clearly be when no refraction is at play or minimal refraction is at play. But when you see an observation where something disappears below a water line, you're assuming that you're looking at the water. You're not realizing that you're looking at the diffuse mirage of the water. Okay, you're looking at water that's really not in line as a straight line of sight. You know, all this information is converging with the information above the plane of refraction. And I mean, you're going to even see when you can see this house mirrored upon itself. Okay, that's the specular portion of the mirage. Okay, you're also going to see another scenario which isn't drawn here right now, but as this event, this fold line or plane of refraction, it exists at great distance. So at great distance, all of these angles change. So you might see further along this path that there's also the appearance of water that blocks some of this. You know, all of this builds over distance, and it's very difficult for someone who reaches out to the greatest of distance to understand that at that great distance it's difficult to study. You can understand what's happening, but the understanding that I have come to with all of this deals with taking a look at the information produced by Sky Free. Sky Free conducts their observations, and they can reproduce, as they've shown in a lot of their clips, you know, effects that we observe in the macro, in the real world, at great distance with high power cameras. They're producing at smaller distance with zooming in the same way. So between the macro and the micro, the narrative for the effects of what we see have to be explained. What I'm explaining here does that. It scales up and it scales down. Now, this has taken me a very long time in researching refraction, researching the two types of reflection, a lot of additional work, Fresnel's equations, where the minimum angles to all these scenarios can change the dynamics of the understanding of the simple refraction or the simple reflection. It can produce reflections or total internal reflections. And I don't want to confuse anybody at this point. If you're dealing with a reflection, you're dealing with the reversal or the inversion of the information. From a standpoint of specular. From the standpoint of diffuse, if you can't make out anything, it doesn't matter if it's right side up or upside down. All of this that I've put out here is backed by real science and understanding. You know, we have laws, the laws of rectilinear propagation. It means light travels in straight lines. The law of reflection. Light rebounds off of a surface, and that can be water, that can be the heated up gas layer that forms just above, and we're talking insignificantly amount of space above hot asphalt, hot sand, something in that capacity. We're not talking about significance of height above that surface that says it happens along a line of sight well above that surface. So if you want to argue that it hasn't struck a surface because it's in that little bit of air just above it, you need to consider not being so ridiculous. Okay? It's insignificant, that point. So we're seeing the complete mechanics of how a point of reflection and a point of refraction, right here circled, right here, people, okay, and refraction is happening above the surface of the water to redirect two different types of reflection in order for them to come in line with each other to the observer's line of sight. There's so much to expand from off of here, but this video is already going to be long enough, and anybody who has seen the first and didn't find what they're looking for, this will probably replace that video, but give it another shot. This will be called attempt number 2. Both videos will be up for comparison. I would point people, though, to this second attempt. Thank you again for taking the time to entertain my thoughts, my drawing. I mean, a thought, we'll cover this as well, too. I'm sorry. A thought, your ideas, when you're trying to communicate your ideas, what is in your head. You're creating a mental image. I've taken my mental image and I have created a drawing. From these series of slides, I can communicate what is going on in my head as far as the thought process much better. We had Curious respond in my comments as to, how can I communicate back to me? Well, you really have to invest the same amount of energy, because I can't read what's going on in your mind, and you can't always communicate what's going on in your mind. And this circles back then to those who are drawing their conclusions along a path of sight and speculating about everything along that line of sight, with zero reference to understanding it from a side view. You can speculate along a line of sight, but communicating it from a side view really brings the message to people who, haven't put that much thought into what happens along that line of sight. And it also really challenges the thought process or conclusions of someone who has tried to think about what happens along that line of sight. Hopefully this works towards bringing everybody to a more common understanding, and from that common understanding, terminology, answers, and everything that we can build off of this work. This is the last time I'm going to thank everybody for coming here, because I am signing out. Have a great day. Any questions, comments, concerns that are constructive in nature, please put them in the comments section below, and I will attempt to continue this thought process with all the clarity I can add into it based on those comments. Good night.